G'day YouTube, Quaker John here. Today I have Alan with me to discuss the Vulcan S and its engine oil. G'day Alan.
G'day, mate. How you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. Alan is a subscriber of the channel, a regular on livestream and a regular in the chat videos on my channel, and he lives in Michigan, USA. Okay, so Alan, tell us a little bit about your maintenance background.
That's kind of as you know, John. I'm retired, but I spent 33 years. I guess I could say this with the Dow Chemical Company, and my first 18 years with them was as a mechanic. I went through 3 years of intensive training, both in the classroom and then in the field with regards to everything that Dow Chemical had in their plants. They had several plants at the Los Angeles operations, and those plants, styron, epoxy, styrofoam, and others, and lots of different types of pumps, mechanical devices, air veying systems, hydraulics, all of that. So 18 years of that, along with some training in machine work and some training in welding. So the whole point was to become a well-rounded mechanic so that you could handle any problem or issue, troubleshoot anything within the plants, fix it, make repairs, whatever you had to do. So that's my background. I had, along with that, obviously lots of training with oils, just different kinds of metals, just metallurgy type of stuff, and chemicals themselves, because obviously we were exposed to a lot of different chemicals back in the day, some more deadly than others, but that's just kind of the way it was.
Well, thank you. People have been asking who you are, so that gives them a bit of a better idea.
Yeah, I know there's a couple guys that, who is this guy? And I'm like, I'm just an average Joe. I just, like a lot of people, I just worked the average job, got a good job at Dow Chemical, stayed with them, moved my way through, and I really liked being a mechanic. It was one of those things where every day you went to work and you would get a new challenge and you go work on that, fix things, build things, modify, make repairs, all kinds of different, I don't know, challenges, I guess would be the best word, to do what you had to do.
Okay, so which oil is in the Vulcan S when you buy it?
My belief is based on the owner's manual, and I understand that a lot of people back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, even maybe through the 90s, motorcycle manufacturers actually gave you a little hard copy manual on your motorcycle and a little toolkit. They've gotten away from that. If you go to the Kawasaki website, type in your VIN number for your particular motorcycle, it'll pop up the owner's manual for your bike. I strongly suggest everybody kind of read that or go through it. But what Kawasaki basically, I think, puts in there originally is a 1040 oil, 10W40, the W standing for winter. So it's a 10 weight during the winter, which is 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 C, and that temperature frame up to about 40 C, 104 degrees, I think it is, Fahrenheit. That's the temperature range of the oil, and I believe that that's the oil that Kawasaki puts in is a 10W40. They might have some other additives in there, for the break-in period, but that would be my best guess.
Okay, so now why is fully synthetic oil not recommended for the Vulcan S when running the bike in or breaking it in?
You and I have talked about this, and I went looking. There is no, and I've even sent emails to Kawasaki asking that question. They just say 1,200 U.S. British miles or 2,000, it's 1,900 plus, but 2,000 kilometers, use regular refined oil. That's it. And I'll get to that, some specifications here in a second, but just use that. After that point, after 1,200 US miles or 2,000 kilometers, you can go to synthetic if you wish to do so. Why they don't allow synthetic before that is anybody's guess. And I can't tell you, and there's nobody that I'm aware of that knows the reason why they don't want you to do that. I suspect it has to do with the breaking in of the engine, and they Kawasaki have done a lot of research and development with oils and different types of oils and weights of oils and all that, and they've just said that in order to get the most out of your engine during its initial break-in, use a 10W40 oil that's just a regular refined oil that meets their JASO spec. That's like the API spec here in the United States, but that's their Japan spec, the Japanese spec for their cars and motorcycles, the JASO. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but that's a very important spec when it comes to the motorcycle oil.
So which oil do you recommend for the Vulcan S?
If you take the time to go download the manual and read it, like I said, for the ambient temperatures of 0C to about 40C or about 32F, which is freezing basically, up to about 104 Fahrenheit ambient temperature, they recommend 1040 oil. Now, if you're in Michigan, that's going to work just fine for you. Probably in Australia, California, places where it doesn't get that hot or sustained heat for long periods of time, that's going to work fine for you. If you're like in the southwest of the United States, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, places where you actually get daytime temperatures that are sustained about 105, 110 degrees, you might want to check with your dealer, but according to the owner's manual, a 10W50 might be the weight of oil that you want to run, just because it protects a little better on the top end on those hot day conditions. Personally, and you and I have talked about this, I would never ride a motorcycle in 100-degree heat. That is, now I might get caught in it. I've been caught in it one time. I was on a motorcycle coming back from Vegas, and it was 110 degrees running through the desert there in California at Baker. That was hot. I'm telling you, that's hot. So you might get caught in that. But if you're going to do sustained everyday travel, like if you're in, say, Arizona, and you're running, around in Phoenix or down in Tucson where it gets very hot, maybe down in the southern part of Texas, El Paso, where you're talking sustained heat, you might want to go a little higher weighted oil, like a 10W50, but that's just not something that I'm going to be experiencing here in Michigan, and I don't think California would ever have those type of temperatures. And what you've told me about Brisbane, you get up around into the 90s, but that a 10W40 will do you just fine.
Okay, now oil filters. There are many types of oil filters for the Vulcan S. Why is selecting the right oil filter so important?
That's basically the filtering system for the engine oil. Obviously cools the engine. It helps lubricity, keeps metal parts not contacting each other. So there's a whole lot of things going on, and you want to make sure that any contaminants in the oil gets filtered out. There are specifications for those oil filters. There's YouTube videos that'll actually explain or in more detail, or even there's one guy that I found very interesting. He took a bunch of different oil filters and cut them in half and dissected them, pulled them all apart, and really looked at the pieces and parts that some of these oil filters have in them. Some of them, as you look, if you cut one in half, you'll see it's pleated on the inside. And some have a lot of pleats, some have very few. You'll see that in some of those parts are plastic. Some of those parts are just felt as far as the gasket material internally versus other parts and pieces. If you grab a filter, not that the motorcycle would ever see the kind of pressures to explode an oil filter, but you can grab an oil filter and you can, some of them, you can actually put dents in it. If you squeeze it, you'll put dents in it. The actual metal around there, and manufacturers do that for production costs. There's other ones that are a lot stiffer, so you can sometimes tell by weight. So there's a lot of reasons for doing different type of oil filters. You want one that's going to obviously meet any and all your manufacturing specs. I went with the Wix, W-I-X Ultra. This guy's, when he cut that apart and weighed it and looked at all the pieces and parts, it was very well constructed. It does cost a little more money. It's about $8 versus some of the other $6 and $7 ones. But the whole construction of it, the pleating, everything was really good. And it's important that you do that because oil filters by design have a bypass valve in there. So when they start plugging up, it'll start bypassing, and your oil will not be filtered anymore. It just goes through, and pretty soon now you're circulating oil in the engine that's not filtered. There's contaminants, and you could really ruin the engine doing it that way. So it's important that you do it on the schedule that Kawasaki recommends as a minimum.
Okay, so when buying a new Vulcan S, at what mileage should you change your oil during the running in, braking in period?
Yeah, they recommend you go the first 600 miles. That's 1,000 kilometers, and then I believe the next oil change is at like 3,800 miles. I think it wasn't it? 3,800. Let me do a real quick here. I can do this real quick. Yeah, they recommend the next oil change to be at 6,000 kilometers or 3,800 miles.
Right.
Okay. So that's the range that Kawasaki in the owner's manual, that is the bare bones minimum. 600 miles on the break-in, 3,800 miles on the next one coming up. I do it a little more frequently than that, but that's the minimum that Kawasaki recommends.
Now, yeah, you change your own oil, you do your own servicing. Can you tell us what you did for your bike?
Absolutely. Like I said, after doing some research and looking at the stuff, I'm following Kawasaki's recommendations. It's the 10W40. I use their oil, and their oil, obviously people should know that Kawasaki's a heavy industries consortium in Japan, and they don't refine oil. So they contract out somebody else to make their oil. And that oil is made by Citgo Oil Company. That's the best determination I can find on the internet. Doesn't matter. I put in Kawasaki's 10W40, and I went with the Wix Ultra filter, and I did it. What I was doing, the Kawasaki Vulcan S has a little window in the side, and I was seeing a little bit of different change in the color of the oil during the break-in period. And so what I did, at about 300 miles, I made the first oil change, and I put in their 10W40 with a Wix filter. And then I went to 800 miles and did it again. Now, in the first oil change, I could see a little bit of change in the oil. Obviously, the oil was doing what it was supposed to do. The engine was breaking in. You follow all the recommendations. You try and keep the RPMs around 4,000, thereabouts. Don't lug the engine, that stuff, on the break-in. Now, there's a whole another school of thought of how to break in an engine, but we'll leave it at that. And then I changed it at 800, and now for the next oil change, I'll have about 1,600 miles, and I'll be done for the season. And I'll put clean, fresh oil in it and a filter for the winter. I'm getting ready here in about another month. And then the bike will sit about 6 months in a garage. I'll run it a little bit. I'll roll it around some, check on the battery and that kind of thing. But I'm not going to be able to ride it. It'll be too cold. And with road and ice and snow, it's just not going to work. In California, that's a whole different story. You can ride year round. The only thing that you really experience in California, if you're in the Los Angeles area or along the coast or anything, which is where I used to live, is rain. You know, that's it. The temperatures are always temperate. It's one nice thing. That's why everybody wants to live in California. Brisbane basically has the same conditions. I assume Perth and Melbourne has kind of the same conditions where you can ride pretty much year round. Texas, Arizona. There might be other parts of the world. India. I don't know. We have a gentleman from Romania, I think it was, and another guy from the UK. Not sure how their temperatures go or whether they see snows and that kind of cold temperatures or whether they'd even ride in that. But yeah, so there you go. That's the frequencies that I did because I'm a little OCD on some of that stuff.
There's why is it so important to change the oil frequently when you're running a bike in, when you're breaking it in?
Because as anybody should know, or if you don't know, all the years of my mechanical experience, even though a piece of metal looks really smooth to the visual eye, bearings, shafts, and whatnot, when you look at it microscopically, there's peaks and valleys. And what happens is you're bedding in a plain journal bearing onto a crankshaft, and it's wearing down over time. It'll wear itself in. It's wearing off all of those peaks and valleys, and the oil is the only thing that keeps it from really getting way hot and seizing. The oil becomes the cooling part and the lubricity part, and it's carrying away all those microscopic, we're talking, 10, 15 micron pieces of metal parts floating around in your oil. And then it's going through the filter, getting filtered out, and then clean oil back into your engine. So the oil acts both as a lubricant and as a cooling piece to your engine. Now, obviously, in the Kawasaki Vulcan S, there's you have a radiator and a cooling. They have jackets and that kind of stuff to help to cool. In the old days, it used to just be air cooling as the other part, but that's why you'll see an oil change color. That's why you'll see, that's why you need to change it, because the filter will start becoming clogged with those fine particles and pieces and parts. It's nothing damaging to the engine. That's the normal break-in, and probably the most critical part with a motorcycle or any internal combustion engine is where the rings and the pistons seat. That is the important piece. That's where you get, quote, the power. Where you've got up on top, you've got all this compression and ignition and the fuel and air mixtures going, and down below is, it's ramping up and down. So the piston rings are the ones that separate those two. That's the critical path, the critical point. That's where a lot of wearing in goes on, is the rings and the cylinder walls. And then down in the journals, I don't know if they use plain journals or roller bearings, but I know camshaft bearings and other things. All that has to wear in. Chains, all of that, all that stuff wears in.
Thanks, Alan. Final question: when buying a new Vulcan S, what mileage? And there's quite a few people on the channel who are buying new Vulcan S's. What mileage should you change the oil during the running? Oh, we cover that one. How frequently should you change your oil once the Vulcan S is broken in?
Well, and that's, if you follow the ordnance manual, they'll tell you the first one's at 600 miles or 1,000 kilometers. The next one is like at 3,800 miles. I'm thinking like 6,000 kilometers. And then the next oil change that the owner's manual recommends is 12,000 kilometers, or roughly about 7,600 miles. That's the recommendation. And Kawasaki obviously has done a lot of research and development. They've run their engines for probably days and days and days, probably until failure, and they figured out where that best break point is. So obviously changing the oil and filter sooner is a better deal for the engine. But on the flip side, it's going to cost you a little more money with the maintenance. So it really depends on how often you run your motorcycle, in my opinion. If you're in Michigan, like I am here, most of the people that I know, they change the oil and filter at the end of the season, like what I'm going to be doing here in winter. And then when they get ready to ride, the bike's ready to go. They ride all season and then they change it again at the end of the season. But if you're putting a lot of miles on your bike, you're probably going to change the oil and filter prior to that.
Thanks, Alan, for your comments. It's very interesting.
Yep. No, thank you, John. Thanks for everybody listening to this. Hopefully, I've helped you in some way or fashion. It's what I do with my friends here locally in Michigan. If they ask questions about stuff, all I'm trying to do is help other people, do what they want to do.
Okay, no worries. See you, mate.
See ya.
Thanks for watching my video. If you enjoy my videos, subscribe to the channel. Live stream is on every Wednesday night at 10 PM Brisbane, Australia time. You're most welcome to join in. You are most welcome to join the Quacker John chat room, and the link for your invitation to join the Quacker John chat room is in the comments under the video. See ya!